What's up, adventurers? Why did Frodo bring a ladder to Mordor? Because he heard the path was a bit of an uphill battle. Today, we're embarking on an epic journey through Middle-earth, but not as Frodo or Aragorn. Instead, as players and game masters using the brand new book, The Lord of the Rings Roleplaying, adapted for the D&D 5e system. Is this just a reskinned Dungeons & Dragons game, or does it offer something unique? Let's roll for initiative and dive in. Before we get started, I want to give a huge thank you to my patron supporters who made this video happen. I recently lost my job, so it's people like you that keep this channel alive. If you're interested in helping me grow while I look for a new job, smash that subscribe button, share the video, and consider becoming a patron via the link in the video description below. So let's get started with the big question. Is this just regular D&D in a Middle-earth costume? At first glance, it might seem that way. It uses the 5e framework and familiar mechanics like rolling the d20. Ability checks, combat, and leveling up are all here and very similar to 5e. But don't let that fool you into thinking that this is just a rehash. The design team went to great lengths to ensure that this feels distinctly Tolkienian. They replaced standard D&D terminology with thematic equivalents. For example, instead of races, you choose a culture. Instead of classes, you select a calling. Even the DM isn't a dungeon master. Here, they're the lore master. These small changes set the tone for the whole game, reminding you that this isn't about kicking down doors and grabbing loot and facing a dragon. It's about storytelling and moral choices and exploring a world steeped in history and lore. In this video, I'm going to break down the key differences so that you can make up your mind and see if this is a decision that you and your table want to go play. So let's start off by taking a look at Shadow and Corruption. This, in my opinion, is the most standout, noteworthy feature here. In Middle-earth, the fight against Sauron isn't just physical, it's psychological and moral. The Shadow mechanic reflects this. So what exactly is it? Shadow and Corruption represent the creeping influence of Sauron, the enemy, on the hearts and minds of the player heroes. It's not just physical combat that wears down adventurers, it's the emotional toll, the moral dilemmas, and the temptations that they face. Shadow points are the key mechanic. These are a measure of emotional and moral strain on your character. Accumulating shadow points isn't just about the big, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's the quiet, insidious ones that weigh heaviest. Think about Frodo struggling under the weight of the One Ring, or Boromir's fall to temptation. It all comes down to corruption. If shadow points aren't dealt with, they lead to this corruption. It represents a hero's descent into despair, or even outright betrayal of their values. Corruption is the tipping point where your character might become a tool of the enemy, or break under the weight of their burdens. How do you gain shadow points? The game provides specific and thematic triggers for gaining them. The first of these is exposure to the enemy's influence. Witnessing acts of great evil, standing in the presence of corrupted beings, or even spending time in cursed or tainted places can add shadow. Shadow is also tied to your character's choices. If a hero acts out of greed, cowardice, or malice, essentially falling into behaviors that align with Sauron's influence, they automatically gain shadow. Fear and despair can also affect shadow points. Middle-earth is a dangerous place, and facing overwhelming odds can instill terror or hopelessness. Failing a wisdom saving throw in the face of fear might result in shadow. And finally, like I mentioned above, each shadow path, each calling, think classes, has its own unique shadow path. This determines how a hero's descent into corruption manifests. For instance, a scholar might become obsessed with forbidden lore. A treasure hunter could succumb to greed, a la Smaug's Horde, and a champion might spiral into wrath, becoming consumed by their thirst for vengeance. What are the effects of shadow? It's not just a number on your character sheet. As it grows, it starts to impact your character in meaningful ways. First of these is the anguished condition. If shadow points exceed or meet your wisdom score, your character becomes anguished. This reflects their inner turmoil, making them prone to distraction or outbursts. In games, this might impose penalties to social interactions or wisdom-based skills. The miserable condition happens if your shadow points exceed your wisdom score by a significant margin. You then become miserable. At this point, your character is teetering on the edge, susceptible to despair and corruption. One bad day, a critical failure, a moment of weakness, and they could be lost forever. This leads to final corruption. If shadow completely overtakes your character, they're succumbed to corruption. This could mean abandoning the party entirely, joining enemy forces, or even permanent narrative exit from the game. It is a built-in mechanic that raises the stakes in every decision beyond just killing off your character like in D&D. Luckily though, heroes aren't completely defenseless against this encroaching shadow. The game gives you tools to fight back. The first of these is called fellowship points. These are shared resources that can be spent to gain advantage on rolls or avoid shadow accumulation. It's a reminder that even in Tolkien's world, hope often lies in companionship. The next defensive tool lies in the fellowship phase, a downtime mechanic critical to counteracting shadow. During the fellowship phase, characters can engage in activities to reduce shadow points, such as resting in a safe haven, seeking counsel from a patron like Gandalf, or simply reflecting on their journey. One example might be visiting Rivendell and spending time with Elrond, who might restore a sense of purpose and clear some shadow from your soul. And finally, role-playing opportunities can also reduce shadow. Players can lean into their character's internal struggles, seeking redemption through their actions. This adds layers of depth to the storytelling, as heroes confront their flaws and tries to rise above them. What makes shadow and corruption so compelling is how well it captures the essence of Tolkien's world. It's not just about hacking at orcs. It's about the quiet battles, the moral choices, and the weight of responsibility. Every hero in Middle-earth carries a burden. Aragorn is haunted by the failures of his ancestors. Frodo struggles with the temptation of the rings. And Sam wrestles with fear, but finds strength in loyalty. The shadow mechanic gives players a way to experience these kinds of stories firsthand. Shadow affects more than individual characters. It impacts the group. If one member is teetering on the edge of despair, it might strain relations or force a party to make a tough decision. Do you stop to help your friend recover, risking the mission, or push forward and hope they hold it together? By integrating shadow into the gameplay, the stakes of every decision feel heightened. Choosing to enter a cursed ruin isn't just about loot, it's about what it might cost your soul. These mechanics are the single biggest thing that I feel makes this game distinct. I briefly mentioned it above, so next let's take a look at Fellowship and the adventuring phases. The gameplay is divided into two distinct gameplay loops. The first is the adventuring phase. This is where action happens, combat, exploration, and the big story beats. And then there's the Fellowship phase. Think of this as downtime but with a Tolkien twist. It's where your characters rest, recover, and grow. They might form bonds with other player heroes, reflect on their journeys, or even confront their shadow points. This structure mimics the ebb and flow of Tolkien's stories, where the heroes face trials and then retreat to Rivendell or Lothlorien to recuperate. It is a fantastic tool for pacing a long campaign. In the adventuring phase, this is where the heart of the story unfolds in real time. This is the most similar to a traditional D&D game, but with some unique elements that add depth to your adventures in Middle-earth. The core activities of this phase are combat, journey, and council. Battling orcs, trolls, or even wraiths is a staple of Middle-earth adventures. In the combat phase, most players will feel right at home. This combat system is largely borrowed from 5e, but with thematic tweaks. For example, magic items like Swords of Westernessy or Elven daggers might glow in the presence of orcs, adding tension and narrative flavor. The journey phase is unique in that traveling in Middle-earth isn't a footnote. It's a major part of the adventure. Special mechanics make journeying feel meaningful. Each character here takes on a role, such as the guide, the scout, or a lookout. These roles give players unique ways to contribute. Of course, there are encounters, hazards, discoveries, and events along the way that make the journey itself a source of story and challenge. Finally, there's fatigue and shadow, because while travel is exhausting, both physically and emotionally, missteps here might lead to increasing shadow points or other consequences. And then finally, we end with council. Social interactions are elevated to an art form in this game. When your company seeks aid or information from the wise and great, like Gandalf, Elrond, or even the local innkeeper, Council provides structured mechanics to guide these encounters. Success encounter requires more than a good roll. It's about presenting your case persuasively, often using lore, wit, or charm. What are some of the unique mechanics in the adventuring phase? Well, the lore master determines how quickly time passes during this phase. Some scenes unfold moment by moment, like a tense battle, while others, such as a long journey, might skip ahead days or even weeks. The events of the adventuring phase often set the stage for what happens next. Did you make a powerful ally during Council? Perhaps they'll provide refuge during the Fellowship phase. Did someone in the party succumb to Shadow? That will influence their downtime activities. Every choice feels significant. Entering a dangerous ruin might yield powerful artifacts or leave the company battered and broken. The adventuring phase is designed to immerse players in the epic struggles of Middle-earth. It emphasizes danger, uncertainty, and the weight of history. Every roll of the dice feels like it could change the course of the story, and every choice matters, not just to the characters, but to the world they inhabit. Once the adventuring phase concludes, the company enters the Fellowship phase, which is a time for rest, recovery, and preparation for what's to come. This one too has core activities. Healing and recovery is the first of these, where characters regain hit points and recover from fatigue. The Fellowship phase is one of the few times characters can reduce their accumulated shadow points as well. This might involve seeking counsel from a patron, reflecting on their journey, or finding peace in a safe haven. Beyond just recovery, an activity presented in the Fellowship phase is character development. Players can spend experience points to improve their skills or gain new abilities. They can also pursue personal goals such as crafting an item, researching lore, or reconnecting with cultural roots. This is also a time for the company to strengthen their bonds with one another. Players might roleplay heartfelt conversations, share stories from their pasts, or even resolve tensions that arose during the adventuring phase. Also in the Fellowship phase is something called safe havens. Every company needs a base of operations, a place to regroup between adventures. This could be Rivendell or even Tom Bombadil's house. Safe havens aren't just practical, they're narrative touchstones that tie the characters to Middle-earth's geography and history. During each Fellowship phase, characters can choose a specific undertaking, which is a unique mechanic. These are focused, meaningful actions that shape their development. Examples include meeting a patron by seeking the aid or advice of a figure like Gandalf or Bilbo, healing corruption by spending time in reflection to reduce shadow points, studying lore and researching the history of Middle-earth, potentially unlocking clues for future adventures, and finally, crafting an item by using your skills to create something of lasting value, like a finely crafted sword or an herbal remedy. At the end of each year in the game, the company has a special Fellowship phase tied to the passage of time called the Yule Fellowship phase. This reinforces the sense of an ongoing epic, and it allows players to reflect on the year's events. The Fellowship phase isn't just a breather, it's a vital part of the game's pacing and storytelling. It allows moments of quiet and introspection, which make the actions of the adventuring phase feel all the more intense. This phase gives players a chance to explore their characters' inner lives. What are they fighting for? What fears or regrets do they carry? Decisions made during the Fellowship phase, like forging alliances or crafting items, can have lasting consequences in the campaign. By tying character development to the world's lore and geography, the Fellowship phase helps players feel like a part of Tolkien's world. These alternative phases are more than just a clever mechanic. They're a storytelling engine. The adventuring phase delivers high-stakes action, while the Fellowship phase brings introspection and growth. Together, they create a rhythm that mirrors Tolkien's tales, making your campaign feel like a true journey through Middle-earth. For even the smallest person can change the course of the future. So whether you're fighting trolls in the Misty Mountains or sharing stories in the Prancing Pony, know that every moment is part of your epic tale. In the introduction of this video, I said some things were also just changed in name to represent the different themes in Lord of the Rings. One such example was the use of culture instead of races. In Lord of the Rings role-playing, the concept of species from traditional D&D or races has been reimagined as cultures, a shift that emphasizes the narrative depth and rich history of Middle-earth. Unlike the more generic traits in standard 5e, cultures here are deeply rooted in the world, offering players a way to connect their characters to the grandeur of Tolkien. Each culture reflects these values, traditions, and unique challenges of its people, shaping not only the characters' abilities but also their role in the story. Hobbits, for example, from the Shire embody quiet courage, stealth, and an unshakable love for home and hearth, while the elves of Lindon carry the wisdom and melancholy of an ancient race slowly fading from the world. Other cultures, like the dwarves of Durin's folk, bring pride and resilience coupled with a love of crafting, deep connection to mountain homes. Men of Bree are practical and adaptable, making them reliable and grounded adventurers, while rangers of the north offer mystery and martial skill, acting as the protectors of the wild. Each culture is further subdivided into specific subcultures, such as the hobbits, fallowhides, harfoots, and stoors, adding another layer of personality. Mechanically, cultures grant distinct trait proficiencies and background options, like the elves' keen eyes, which enhances perception, or the dwarves' make light of burdens, doubling their carrying capacity. These traits not only enhance gameplay, but also ground the characters in the Middle-earth setting, ensuring that every adventurer feels like a living part of the world. The focus on culture here invites players to consider their character's heritage and worldview as integral to their story, creating a richer, more immersive role-playing experience. This approach, combined with detailed backgrounds tied to each culture, makes choosing the culture far more than just stats. It's a gateway to deeper role-playing and a stronger connection to the legendary world. Classes here are replaced with callings, which represent characters' motivations and role within the Fellowship. These callings tie deeply into the theme of storytelling in Tolkien's world, focusing on the unique blend of heroism and personal struggle that defines adventurers in Middle-earth. Each calling has a distinct flavor, offering specialized abilities, unique proficiencies, and thematic shadow paths that highlight the moral dangers tied to their choices. The captain embodies a blend of charisma and martial prowess, akin to characters like Eriador. With a D10 hit die, they're frontline leaders, proficient in all armors, shields, and martial weapons. Their abilities focus on inspiring allies, providing temporary hit points, and leading with aura-like effects that bolster those around them. As captains advance, they gain titles like Chieftain or Thane, offering specialized leadership features. The Shadow Path for captains explores the burden of leadership, potentially leading to despair if they falter under the weight of their responsibilities. Champions are fierce fighters, excelling in combat through raw power and precision. They serve as the martial backbone of a fellowship, with a D10 hit die and proficiency in heavy armor and martial weapons. They're closest to traditional D&D fighters. Their subclass paths, sharpshooter, and slayer allow for specialization in ranged or melee combat, offering features like Mighty Shot or Battle Fury. Champions' shadow paths delves into dangers like letting Rage of Vengeance consume them, providing a rich role-playing challenge. Messengers, on the other hand, are quintessential travelers of Middle-earth, responsible for carrying news and forging alliances. With a D8 hit die, light armor proficiency, and a focus on dexterity and charisma, they excel in mobility and negotiation. Abilities like Tireless and Swift improve their speed and resistance to exhaustion, while their unarmored defense emphasizes their diplomatic immunity. Their paths, Counselor or Herald, allow further specialization in aiding allies or delivering crucial information. The Shadow Path for messengers reflects the risk of losing oneself to endless wandering and aimlessness. Scholars are intellectual cores of a fellowship, akin to Gandalf or Elrond. With a D8 hit die, light armor proficiency, and intelligence as their primary ability, they focus on ancient lore, healing, and support. Scholars can craft potions, decipher ancient texts, and gain culture virtues that enhance their skills. Their shadow path often involves an obsession with forbidden knowledge, or the temptation to use power recklessly, making them both invaluable and vulnerable. Treasure hunters are next up, and you can think of them as kind of the roguish type of Middle-earth, blending stealth and wit to navigate challenges. With a D8 hit die and proficiency in light armor and finesse weapons, they specialize in recovering lost artifacts or infiltrating enemy strongholds. Their paths, burglar or spy, reflect different styles of play, offering abilities like sneak attack, quiet-footed movement, or uncovering enemies' weaknesses. The Shadow Path for treasure hunters centers on greed and the corrupt influence of treasure, highlighting the moral complexities of their quests. And Wardens are the defenders of Middle-earth, drawing strength from their bond with the land. With a D10 hit die, proficiency in medium armor and martial weapons, and wisdom as a key attribute, They blend martial and natural abilities. Warden's abilities include sensing nearby threats, extra attacks, and long strides that allow them to traverse terrain easily. Their shadow path reflects the toll of constant vigilance and potential for isolation or despair. Each player hero is capped at 10 levels, reflecting the grounded heroism and the gritty nature of Middle-earth, where grand feats often come at great costs. There's no godlike characters here. The shadow paths unique to each calling deepen the role-playing experience, emphasizing the moral and emotional struggles that define Tolkien's characters. By tying abilities to motivations and themes rather than abstract mechanics, callings encourage players to create heroes that feel authentic to the world of Middle-earth, offering a fresh and immersive alternative to traditional D&D classes. And yes, you can have more than one calling, multi-calling in fact, and I know a bunch of you out here have been waiting for this next part of the deep dive, magic. In The Lord of the Rings, magic is not a ubiquitous force as it often is in traditional D&D. Instead, it is rare, it is subtle, and it is deeply tied to the moral and spiritual themes of Tolkien's world. The presence of the shadow adds an extra layer of complexity to the use and perception of magic, reflecting the dangers and burdens it carries in Middle-earth. Magic in this setting is less about flashy fireballs or routine healing spells, and more about awe-inspiring feats, ancient artifacts, and the profound connection between the wielder and the natural or supernatural forces of the world. The rarity of magic means that characters and items imbued with magical properties stand out as truly extraordinary. There are no spell slots, and you don't cast spells here like traditional D&D. So if this is something that you are really looking forward to, this game definitely isn't for you. But elves, for example, may display their natural grace and wisdom through magical successes, achieving seemingly impossible feats like walking on snow without sinking, or perceiving far-off threats. These acts feel grounded in the lore, resonating the wonder and mysticism imbued in the works here. However, with great power comes the looming threat of shadow. The corruption mechanic underscores the moral weight of using or possessing magic items, especially if it originates from tainted sources or is wielded recklessly. A character who frequently relies on magic in morally ambiguous situations may find themselves accumulating shadow points, which signifies the creeping influences of Sauron's corruption. Artifacts like the Sword of the Westernessy or Elven Cloaks similarly embody this balance. While these items provide undeniable benefits, such as glowing in the presence of orcs or conferring stealth advantages, their history and origin can also be a source of shadow. For example, a character carrying a cursed blade or an artifact tied to a tragic past might gain shadow simply by possessing it, especially if they succumb to the artifact's darker temptations. The relationship between magic and shadow also reflects the cultural attitudes of Middle-earth's inhabitants. Men, hobbits, and dwarves often regard magic with suspicion or awe, recognizing its capacity for both good and harm. This adds yet another role-playing dimension, as characters may need to weigh the social and emotional consequences of their magical abilities or artifacts especially. For the Lore Master, this section opens by stating, when framing each scene of an adventuring phase, it's useful to think of the job of the Lore Master as being similar to that of theater or movie directors, choosing and arranging the basic elements of the stage that the characters will act on during the next session of play. What is important is that the Lore Master doesn't have to worry about telling a story, but only needs to provide the players with its basic ingredients. It's up to the players to pick them up and to compose them into a full-blown narrative through their choices and actions. The Lore Master in the Lord of the Rings role-playing is a fascinating take on the traditional Dungeon Master role, blending familiar responsibilities with unique challenges tailored to Tolkien's Middle-earth. Like a DM, the Lore Master leads the narrative, manages the rules, and responds to player choices, crafting an intricate story. However, where the Lore Master differs is in their deep commitment to the established lore of Middle-earth, ensuring the game captures the thematic richness and moral gravity of the setting. While a Dungeon Master might enjoy boundless creative freedom, the Lore Master operates within its constraints of Tolkien's canon, requiring not only a deep understanding of the lore, but also a skillful touch to maintain authenticity. The role includes balancing the narrative focus on player heroes while carefully incorporating iconic figures like Gandalf or Aragorn in supporting roles. For experienced dungeon masters, being a lore master here can be a shift, reining in high magic or flashy epic moments in favor of subtler storytelling devices like moral dilemmas, the encroaching shadow, and the hardships of travel. While it can be rewarding to create adventures steeped in such a legendary world, the lore master's role demands a unique blend of historian, storyteller, and referee, which might feel restrictive or challenging for those used to D&D's creative freedom. Yet for those willing to immerse themselves fully in Middle-earth, it is an experience as rich and as rewarding as Tolkien's world itself. The book comes complete with a chapter entirely focused on the world to help lore masters out. Eriador, the Shire, Lake Everdeen, Mount Graham, and more are included here, along with stat blocks for many NPCs. Each of these sections provides a unique map and sort of descriptions of unique places within. There are no city maps here, so keep that in mind if you're preparing to run this game. My final thoughts? The Lord of the Rings role-playing isn't just a reskin of D&D. It's a loving adaptation of Tolkien's world, designed to immerse players in their stories, themes, and challenges of Middle-earth. From shadow mechanics to unique cultures and callings, this game invites you to walk in the footsteps of heroes while telling your own unforgettable story. But, and if this is what you were wanting to know all along, I'm sorry you had to sit through the entire video. It may surprise you to know, I don't actually recommend this game for most people. If you are a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan, and you have a group of similarly minded players and a game master, lore master, to run it, I think it could be fantastic. Mechanics-wise, great game. No doubt about it. But I think it really comes down to being restricted to a world that few people in the grand scheme of the tabletop role-playing genre want to be in. This is the same problem here that Games Workshop has with their Lord of the Rings tabletop war game. I feel like Wizards is also going to struggle. It's just not mainstream enough for groups of tabletop nerds like me to pick up. And the elephant in the room, it's competing for my personal tabletop recommendation for Lord of the Rings role-playing, The One Ring. I feel that does a better job overall, scratching the Tolkienian itch. However, if you do fall into a situation where you have a bunch of fellow players who really want to play Lord of the Rings, but don't want to stray too far from the D&D system you know, I would say to give it a try. Again, thank you so much to my patrons for making this video happen. Make sure that you like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so that I can bother you with notifications when I publish new videos, and all the links to my socials are in the video description below. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling those dice, and may your quests in Middle-earth be epic.